I was laying in bed after the Warrior-Laker game, and it occurred to me that there has not been that meaningful of a Warriors game that was just had that much like real world energy around it in what, 2 years?
When's the last time you watched an NBA game start to finish?
I mean, I've watched some NBA games start to finish, but like really not like that. Not like I did Wednesday night. Like
yeah, that's
lock
what I
in.
mean. When's the last time you watched an NBA game start to finish like you would a big game in
I
other
mean, this
sports?
year I went to a Warriors. I went to a couple games this year.
I'm not talking about ones you were going to call. I'm just saying, I'm not talking even the Warriors. I'm just talking for your entire life. I'm with you. I watched a lot of NBA games, non-Warrior game, and I did watch some Warriors games start to finish. Non-Warrior game, I didn't watch one start to finish. They couldn't keep my attention.
Yeah,
and one,
I don't think I did this year either. Non-Warrior game.
It was historically the worst season in the history of the league in terms of discrepancies of games, right? I mean, there was several on a given night 30, 40-point blowouts. It was like an epidemic. Is that the right word? All over the league this year.
That's funny. It's a great word, especially because we've been using the word pandemic so much, but epidemic.
I know. That's why it came out of my mouth.
I'm
like, is this correct?
Yeah.
But it was a problem. Like the league just wasn't competitive this year. Not from like there weren't talented players or whatever, but when two teams would play, more often than not, one team would give up. You know, that's what made last night cool. Is like there's a lot on the line. I don't know. People are going to try.
Yeah.
And it's just something that the NBA has kind of gotten away from the last couple of years. And then you factor in Steph and LeBron. But really, to me, Steph is more fun to watch than LeBron at this point. I'm not some LeBron hater as a player. He's an all-time great top two player. One thing I found out last night, like he doesn't do it for me anymore. And it's not really any fault of his own. It's just his law of diminishing returns. He's been around too long. Like Michael only played for 13 years. LeBron's going on like year 40.
I think the most respectful way to describe that for LeBron, because you're not saying he's not entertaining by NBA. I mean, he's like, I think Steph is the number one. Well, let me ask you this, because I think he is the number one. Him and Brady, probably the number one just guy that you have to watch. Mahomes, maybe, but I think Steph even has more. You know, now it's hard to compete with the NFL. But here's the way I would say it about LeBron. LeBron right now, to me, I mean, you got to watch him because he's in the biggest games and he's the best player. He feels like Clemson, Alabama national championship games. I got nothing but respect for Clemson, Alabama. The whole world knows they're the best programs in college football. But when those two play in the national title game, the ratings have gone down the more those teams play in the national title. LeBron played he played in 8 straight finals. He's played in 10. He's the greatest player. You can't overexpose the greatest player, but I think Steph, how many years really did we have of Steph as the clear number one MVP level, try and shoot as much, score as much as possible guy? Once KD arrived, we haven't had that guy for a few years. Now that guy's back, and they weren't great this year, but you had a playoff environment game. It was just a reminder. Not that, there haven't been several reminders over the course of the year, but just on a big national stage.
Well, and one major difference last night is at the end of the day, whether LeBron had existed or instead of signing LeBron, they had signed Kevin Durant, like whoever the Lakers had and they were good, their brand is just going on 50-plus years of just generation after generation.
I know, it is crazy.
The Warriors are talked about this huge brand, and the thing you realize last night, it ain't the Warriors. It's Steph. Like the Lakers are not LeBron, right? They're the Lakers. Now, obviously he's their best player, but like with Kobe and Shaq, like with Magic, like with Jerry, you just go through the years. Like they're just gonna, when LeBron goes, they'll just have 2 more stars, like just who they are. Obviously, the Warriors are gonna go big game hunting with Joe Lacob. That's how he thinks. But I don't know, unless you get a historically great player. That's one thing the Lakers have always done. They've just reloaded the clip, right? It's gonna be hard. And I think you're going to feel this a little bit with like New England and Belichick's still there. So it's still like
when Bill leaves is when it changes.
Yeah. It's like if Josh turns into the next Kyle Shanahan, McVay, and Mac Jones is, a top 5 player, then yeah, you'll be fine. But does it turn out like, no, it wasn't really the Patriots. It was Bill and Tom. Cause I'm watching the Warriors and I've said this forever. If it was Anthony Davis and James Harden, and let's say they were a top 2 or 3 team in the league, like they wouldn't do it for me. And part of it is that guy, and really Draymond and Clay. Like I just know what I'm getting in a big game. I want to be just like, okay, I'm in with these guys. Win or lose, I know I'm getting a big boy performance. And I don't even know why I did this, because there was a brief moment where I'm like, I'm not going to get too cocky on Twitter, but I hate that. One, I just hate the Lakers. 2, like I hate LeBron now, and I don't really have a reason. I just like rooting against him. Like I want him to fail. Like I'm actively rooting against him, and it might just be because like I hate the Lakers. It's just like it's one of those things in me. Still a little fanny where I just see that brand. I hate them, and it could be jealousy from my youth, whatever. But it is what it is, and it's also what makes sports healthy. It drives me there to keep an eye on them, right?
Absolutely.
So it's what you want. Like
when he's laying on the ground, you're yelling at the TV, "Get up! You're fine."
What was Paul Swearingen's thing about hate it or love it? You never want to be in the middle?
Paul was the guy who hired me in Fresno, my first radio job, and I produced a show for many years and worked with him. And he was just like, "Yeah, you be hated or loved, but if you're in the middle, that's called apathy." And I think we always talked about it from like a college football standpoint, like no one's buying your tickets, basically.
Yeah, I do think LeBron's Q rating with the average fan is probably down, but it's like I think people hating him is not a bad thing.
And people and that's the thing with Steph is it's harder and harder probably to find people. That was what the beauty of Steph initially was, all the shimmying and all that stuff. Is like you could find people. You had this guy who's just incredibly likable, but you could find people who hated him. Right?
I've met people that hate him.
I know people kind of perfect.
I know people that don't like him.
Yeah, he's kind of perfect in the sense that he is joy, which I think is, if you could have one quality from an athlete, you'd want joy, because that's why people are coming to sports, is for some joy. So
Mahomes.
Mahomes. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like angry pitchers, angry linebackers, like all that stuff is just as good. But if you had like a face of the league, you'd want joy. But also he's like, you don't want to use the word arrogant or cocky, because those are like insinuate that the person hasn't earned it. But Steph just did things through his joy that pissed people off, and he's this perfect combination, because you can just argue about him all day long. So he's great. Like the NBA, the more of him, the better, because this version of Steph, which is just no matter where he is, he gets the shot, he gets to shoot, right? Like the end of that game, if Kevin Durant's on the team, they might win the game. They might at least hit a shot to tie the game. Why? It's harder to guard Steph and KD and Clay. Now, maybe if Clay's there, it's a different animal too, right? I think you saw that at the end of the game.
Well, even just those guys are there, they're not even in that game.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you don't understand what I'm saying. Like a game in that circumstance.
Yeah.
But so you win less, but you add drama. Like adding Kevin, of course they should have added Kevin, but it removed drama from the league, from not just from the Warriors games. It removed drama from the entire league, and to me, that's I think some of the early seeds for me of watching less regular season basketball started that year when the regular season I knew it didn't matter all that much, and it didn't. Right? And even a lot of the playoff games didn't matter, which, again, if you have the ability to build an unbeatable team, you should build it 100 times out of 100. But we get some of the Steph back now where, he needs to have these heroic moments because he's not on a super team.
Yeah, I think
and that's good.
Last night was just a game that was what the NBA desperately needs. It just reminded me of when the league was cool. I mean, they're a league that's taken on a lot of water and a lot of toxicity, just negative, just kind of indifference, which is never good for your sport. And clearly the ratings reflected that. Last night was like, damn, I had to watch it. And just back to original point, like I hadn't really thought about like that in a couple of years. Now it's unique. I mean, it's your two most famous players. Yeah. So it's just, and if Kevin is in their world, Kevin doesn't force people.
But John, this is what, remember, you've said this about Brady and, Brady Manning played a ton. Like part of this is you just need your best players to play repeatedly in big games, and that's really good for you. Period.
Well, it's impossible in the NBA now. I was listening to some of Simmons had Dirk on, just because I just love Dirk Nowitzki, and he just talked about they were just going through from 02 to 11, all these devastating losses and unreal wins. It's like you just had all this equity. That's the league I grew up on. You just attached to a team. You rooted for your squad. You had a couple teams you hated. You know what that is? That's the National Football League.
Yeah.
You just get a team, and you have a decent idea who their core is going to be at minimum for 4 or 5 years. The NBA a year later is like, I'm out. See ya. It's like, well, you can't even go. No, you got to trade me. It's like, well, you got 17 years left in your contract. Fuck you, I'm out. It's like, Jesus.
Yep.